Question number one, if someone has an uncomfortable history with tracking meals, is there a way to put yourself in a deficit without tracking? And on that note, how does one move forward with getting comfortable with tracking once again after a bad experience? In my opinion, you do not need to formally track in order to create a deficit. That being said, if you are choosing not to track, it is worth noting there's going to be a greater margin of error. There is a possibility that you might be in a little bit less of a deficit than you think. That's an important thing to know expectation wise. Things might be a little less, streamlined if you aren't tracking, but there are definitely things you can do to move the needle regardless. So the first technique is called the 70% rule. I have used this with a lot of people who are wary of tracking, people who are going on vacation or something like that and want to enjoy themselves but still work on weight loss. And basically how it goes is you're eating until you're 70% full, and then you're stopping for 10 to 15 minutes before you eat anything else. And then you're just really paying attention to your body's cues. And the reason why this works is it sometimes takes our brain some time to catch up to our stomach. We might have eaten enough to fuel us, but we could still have hunger signals going off in our brain telling us to eat more. Once you introduce a little bit of time, your brain might be like, oh, actually, I am full enough after all, I do not need any more. And so this can be a really good way to create a deficit, especially if you're somebody who is used to eating, until you feel completely satiated. Another thing you could do is just make a few little swaps in your recipes. If there are things you eat every single day, like for example, I drink coffee with creamer and maple syrup every morning. It's like my little guilty pleasure. That's a place where I could replace my creamer, maybe my sweetener, with something lower calorie. And then I can kind of just like set it and forget it. On a day-to-day basis, I don't have to do anything major to create a deficit. I'm just doing it by swapping that one ingredient. And you can do this with so many different things. There are some oatmeal brands that have like lower calories per packet of oatmeal. I might choose those if I'm in a cut because I still get to have like my full bowl of oatmeal. I don't have to measure out any less, but it's automatically going to be less because the brand I chose has less calories per serving. Another really easy one could be, making a swap to the meat that you're consuming if you're someone who consumes meat. So, my grocery store has a 96% lean ground beef, which is super lean. I know not every store has that, but, if I'm used to eating like an 85 or a 90% lean, just making that quick swap is a way to reduce my calories without, again, having to make like massive changes to what I'm actually consuming. Okay, so this third technique doesn't require you to track, but it is best if you have like a good idea of how much you currently consume of things. So I do think before you dive into something like this, and honestly, the last tip as well, it does help to kind of just go a week or two and just kind of observe, like how much do I eat on a normal basis. From there, what you can do is just serve yourself a little bit less of every portion, or eat less of every portion. So if you have an awareness that like whenever you cook a baked potato, you eat the whole thing, and you want to create a deficit, you could do so by eating like 75% of your baked potato and then making like some more small similar swaps across the span of your day. For example, maybe you do an oat bowl in the mornings. Maybe you're just going to leave like 10% of that uneaten, and that's not something that you would usually do. That's a way that you can create a deficit without actually tracking. Again, it's like a little bit iffy if you do not have like a good understanding of your current intake. Like some people might look at a plate of rice and be like, I have no idea how much I would usually eat. In that instance, it's going to be a little bit hard for you to taper back from that. And that's when something like the 70% rule could come in handy. But I do think that's a really good technique if you are someone who does have a decent understanding of what your plate usually looks like. Now, as for how to get back into tracking, there's a few ways you can go about this. One thing that I actually highly recommend is some of the features in Ladder Nutrition because I feel like they are like the easiest, simplest ways to track, where you don't really need to be putting a lot of mental effort, which often relates to emotional effort as well, into tracking. So, it could be taking a picture of your food and then uploading it to the app, and it will approximate calories based on that. You can also talk to the app and be like, I had like a fist's worth of chicken, and I had like what looked like half a cup of rice. And then it will also approximate based on that. Again, it's not going to be like as perfect as if you were tracking things with like a measuring cup and a scale, but it's going to give you some good, decent information to work off of. And, I think when you're just starting to track again, that is all you need. If seeing the numbers in ladder nutrition freaks you out, like the number thing is getting in your head, what I've done with some people in the past is just do a food diary without even logging. And so that could be something as well, where you just take a picture of your plate over time, just to, again, kind of get a sense for what you're currently doing. And that can help with playing around with portions, like I mentioned earlier. I did just mention like a hand's worth of chicken. That kind of leads to my next point. Precision Nutrition developed this way of tracking that basically approximates things based on like a thumb's worth of oil, a hand's worth of protein. And they actually did some research to see how accurate that was. And, obviously, again, there's a little bit of a margin of error, but it was like more accurate than you think it would be. And so that can be another technique that can help if you're like, I want to steer clear of the numbers, but I do want to make sure I'm getting enough full servings of maybe protein in each day. So I'll post the information I have for that if you're more interested in learning about hand tracking. Anyways, this video is getting really long, and those are all my main tips. If you guys want any more, if you have any questions, definitely let me know below. By the way, I will be answering more questions after this one as well.